This is Somewhere in the Skies with Ryan Sprague.
Hi, Ryan. My name is Nick. I am a warehouse manager for a datacom company. Just recently moved to Hampton, Virginia a couple months ago. Grown up around this area. I've had a interest in UFOs, aliens, etc. for on and off, but recently with the David Grush testimony and the congressional hearings and everything, I got a bit more into it these past few months. That's when I found your show. And because of that, I just have this inclination now that when I step outside, I just look up around in the sky, scan it, see if I see anything, and move on. And so the night of October 28th, I did. So earlier that night, me and my girlfriend had gotten into a conversation somehow about sort of spirituality and reincarnation and things like that. I tend to think that I tend to believe in reincarnation based on some evidence that I've read. But she was talking about ghosts, and there's the kind of this idea that people can hang around a little bit after they die, usually with some kind of unfinished business or whatever. And I brought up my friend Matt, who died a few years ago, as an example. And I kind of said, you know, he wouldn't have any reason to hang around. The kind of guy he was, he's just going to move on to the next best thing. And I said, you know, he's not around anymore. He's gone. So later that night, around 11, my girlfriend had gone to bed, and I still had my friend Matt on my mind. So I pull up his Facebook page. I start looking through his photos and everything. At a certain point, I started crying. You know, I didn't want to distress my girlfriend or have to explain myself if she came back out. She had just gone to bed. So I went outside to be alone. Like I said, first thing I do when I go outside, just look around in the sky, see if I see anything. And I saw what I first thought was just a star, a bright star. I kept looking around, you know, there's some airplanes and stuff. And I came back to that star, and it was... there was a light on it that was uneven. It was pulsating, sort of. So you would think that's an airplane at first, but it wasn't at a steady pace. And when I first saw it, it was stationary. As I kept looking at it, it began slowly moving to the right or left, whatever. It would go back and forth. And I'm just watching it, and I decide I should take out my phone and start recording. When I zoom all the way in on my phone in the recording, it looks interesting. It's best way I can describe it is like a donut on its side. The center of it is a black circle, and then there's a thick ring of light or electricity or whatever around the outside that pulsates, starts getting bigger and smaller. Blinking, staying still. It's very random. There's not a specific pattern to it. At a certain point, a plane was flying by towards the right. I live near 2 airports and an Air Force base, so I'm familiar with what that looks like in the sky. So I turn my phone over to the airplane just as a comparison, and it looks, you know, completely different. It's just a blinking light on the phone. Turn back to the object, and it doesn't look anything alike. It's a pulsating white circle with a black center. It would move over to the right, stop for a minute, start moving to the left, and I'm holding my phone with both hands to try to keep it steady. And I'd say on the recording, okay, it's moving over towards the right. I'd let it go almost out of frame. And I'm slowly moving my phone back over to the right to follow it, just to try to eliminate people saying, you know, you were just moving your phone around to make it look like it was moving or whatever. So I record it for about 20 minutes. It's still just hanging out in the same area, moving left, moving right. I couldn't really tell if it was going up or down, or back or forward. It was a good distance away, and it's hard to tell at that distance. So eventually I just say, okay, I'm going back inside. I'm tired. But when I get in, I begin a MUFON report, and start filling that out. It took me quite a while to do because I had 20 minutes of video and it didn't want that much data in the attachments. So it wouldn't let me remove them, so I had to start it over 2 or 3 times until I whittled it down to what it would accept. So that took about an hour, and so around midnight I was finished with that. Before I went to bed, I looked back outside and looked for it. It had moved to directly underneath the North Star and was just hovering in place there now. So said okay, and then went ahead to bed. How did it make me feel? Excited, certainly, because I've always wanted to see something interesting in the sky. It made me feel, well, the reason I brought up my buddy Matt earlier was because there's this idea, mainly from Whitley Strieber, that what we call UFOs have something to do with the dead, essentially. And I thought it was extremely strange that I had brought up Matt earlier that night. We were talking about him. I said, he's not around anymore. You know, he's moved on. He's on to the next thing. And then I'm looking at videos of him, or photos of him getting emotional, and I walk outside and immediately this thing is right there. Do I necessarily think it was him or having something to do with him? Not necessarily. I just think that's just very strange, that those were the situations surrounding it. So if it was something to do with that, I feel very blessed and very grateful and very touched to, if it was some sort of contact, to have received that. What do I think it was? Where do I stand on it now? You could convince me that it's a drone. The way it moved was drone-like. It would hover and move left to right. If you could show me a video of a drone that looks like that, kind of pulsating and throwing out electricity or light in a ring around it, I would believe you. But I have yet to see that, and I looked up videos of that after I made the recording. I didn't see anything like that. There is a lot of military activity around here right now. We have some military bases here, and with the things going on in the Middle East, they're pretty active. I know that the military has said that they have things that would blow our minds or whatever. This one wouldn't be so mind-blowing. I don't know what it looks like up close, but I can envision, it's not completely alien technology. If you had a drone that threw out electricity and kind of a ring around it, 360-degree ring, that stayed black at the center, I don't know why you would want to do that, what that would be for, but that could look something like this. So it's not completely alien technology. It wasn't zipping around the sky or making hard 90-degree turns. It's something I can envision us having, although I don't know what it would be or why. But in the end, I just don't know. I don't know what it was. It could be man-made, could be spiritual, could be whatever, extra-dimensional, interdimensional, I don't know. But I'm grateful to have seen it, and I encourage everybody, just keep looking in the skies. Based on how long it took me, I don't think it'll take you long to see something interesting there either. Thanks, Ryan.
Hey Ryan, how you doing? The following story I'm going to tell you, I've told many times before, but this time I'm going to tell it the way it really happened, not the way I was told to tell it. In 1985, I was a U.S. Marine in El Toro, California. Part of my duties as a U.S. Marine in El Toro was to a nuclear weapons security guard. One evening, right around 8 o'clock at night, or as in the military we say 2000 hours, I got a knock at my door, and the duty NCO was at the door, and he said, get ready for guard duty. Someone's going to pick you up in front of the barracks in about 15 minutes. 15 minutes later, a van pulls up and I hop in. And what's kind of odd about this is that the driver of the van is a Marine captain who I didn't recognize. But everybody else in the van I did recognize. They were all nuclear weapons security guards from different units on El Toro. We were a small group and we all knew each other. There was a bunch of Lance Corporals, which I was one, and then there was one E5 sergeant. And we went over to the armory, picked up our M16s. The sergeant picked up his 45. Then the driver proceeded to take us to the last hangar in the row, which is an abandoned hangar. The squadron that was there was overseas in the Far East, so there was nobody using that hangar. We pulled up, and as we pulled up, there were guys that saw us pull up, and they were getting in a truck, what we called a 5-ton truck. And I don't think they were Marine Corps. They didn't look military to me. They just, by their uniforms, they just kind of, they just looked like security guys. And the captain told us to get in the formation next to the hangar. And this is where things get kind of weird. The captain says, okay, here's the deadly force rule for this post. Nobody gets inside this hangar. And he proceeded to hand out a clip of for the M16 with rounds in it. So I was like, oh, okay. So he hands these rounds, and my post was at the door along the back of the hangar. There was a door there, and it was me and another Marine. Our post was right there. And we're standing there, and roughly around midnight, I would say, the sergeant comes around, and he's just checking everybody, making sure no one's sleeping, just saying, hey, how are you doing? Do you need a break? And I asked him, I go, what do you think what are we guarding? And he said, I talked to the captain before he left, and the captain said, it's a speedboat. And I stopped for a minute, and I said, a speedboat? You mean we got authorization to shoot someone over a speedboat if they come inside the hangar? That makes absolutely no sense, right? So he walks off, comes back a little bit later, and I say to him, I said, hey, can we take a look? And he hesitated for a minute, and he said, you know what? Sure, but one at a time, and I'm going first. So he went in, and he came out about 10, 15 minutes later, came out, and as he's walking past us, he said, it's definitely not a speedboat, and he kept walking. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going in next. So I walk in, and this is what I saw. The hangar was dimly lit. The only light in the hangar was the exit sign, and there was one light in the overhead or in the ceiling that was on, but it was pretty dim in there. So I had my flashlight. Kind of an eerie feeling. In the middle of the hangar bay was a trailer, and on that trailer was something about the size of a car. And I would say, when I say car, I mean like an 85 Escort, because that's what I was comparing it to the moment I was looking at it, saying, hey, that's about the size of my car, because I drove a shitty Escort. So I walk over to it, and there was a tarp over the top, but under it, but the tarp didn't go all the way down. You could still see the bottom part. And I look, and it looks to me like, I said, hey, that kind of looks like a boat bottom, Sure, it does. It kind of looks like a boat bottom. So I walk over to it, and I turn my flashlight on, and I look, and I notice that the color is like a matte black. It's like a dark gray black, like a real flat color, no shine to it whatsoever. I didn't see any rivets. I didn't see any seams. So then I pull the tarp back from over the top so I could see the top of it, because I wanted to see where the seats were, and I just wanted to see where you sat in this speedboat. It was totally solid. I went, oh my God, there's nowhere to sit. So I'm like, that's really weird. So I'm looking, and I'm shining my light up in there, and there's no way. There's no door, there's no window, there's no seams, there's no rivets, there's no screws, nothing. This thing was solid. So then I go to the back, and the way it was shaped was, it was like a teardrop. It was kind of fat in the back and kind of pointy in the front, but not pointy, but rounded pointy, if you kind of know what I mean. It didn't have like a boat point. It was kind of rounded. like a teardrop. And then I pulled back the back part where the fat part was, and there was no engine, there was no exhaust outlet, there was no doors, there was no hatches, there was nothing. So that's weird. So I'm looking at it, and I'm baffled. I'm sitting there looking at this thing going, what the hell is this thing? You know? So I put the tarp back where it's supposed to be, and I tighten the straps, and I walk out, and my buddy says to me that I'm standing there, he's going in next. I go, that's no speedboat I've ever seen. I don't know what it is. So he walked in. He comes back about 10 minutes later, and he says, I think it's a bomb. And I'm like, well, maybe it's a nuclear weapon that we don't know. And we knew all the nuclear weapons. We knew each one. And there was 3 or 4 of them, like the B-61, the B-43, those, we knew those, okay? But this we've never seen before, never saw this at all. So right around 0300, the captain rolls back in, and he tells the sergeant that they are coming to get this. So we hear C-130 taxiing up to the front of the hangar, and we're standing there, and it taxis up, and then a C-130 can move backwards. So the pilot actually can back it up a little bit. So they were backing up, and these guys get out, and they are literally they have long hair and beards. They have blue jeans on, boots, and body armor over their chest, and they're carrying MP5s.
Hey everyone, Ryan Sprague here, host of Somewhere in the Skies. If you've ever thought about supporting us, we have great 2 easy options for you right now. If you listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, you can click the subscribe button at the top of your Apple feed. Or you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/somewhereskies. Both of these options give you the same benefits. Early access to the main show, bonus episodes and content, and priority to ask our guests your listener questions. So, to help support Somewhere in the Skies, click that subscribe button on Apple or visit patreon.com/somewhereskies. Thank you so much for your support, and keep looking up.
And I'm like, wow, I've never seen anyone carry an MP5 before. So that's kind of cool. So they start yelling at us to make a perimeter around the airplane. And he goes, and face outwards and don't look back until we tell you it's okay. So as we're setting up our perimeter, I hear the one guy say to the other guy, come on, let's go. Let's get this fucking thing out of here. So, you have a sense of something moving behind you. Well, you could, we felt, we knew they were moving this thing out, and they winched this thing with the trailer and all into the back of the C-130, and we heard the hydraulics lifting the door up, and then they waved us away, and they taxied away. The weird thing about this C-130 is it was an Air Force C-130, which is kind of weird because we're a Marine Corps base, so I don't know. We get ready to leave. The captain puts us in formation, and this is what he says. He says, do not tell anybody what you saw tonight or what you didn't see tonight. What you guarded tonight was a speedboat. Don't tell anybody, just if you talk amongst yourself, it was a speedboat. And then he looked like he was going to say something else, and he kind of looked at us. He looked down, he looked to the side, and we were waiting for his next words, and then he just looked at us and took a breath and goes, dismissed. And he walked off. We got back in the van, he got in the van, and it was a quiet ride home. Recently, and when I say recently, I mean maybe 5-6 years ago, I finally talked to that one sergeant. I found him on Facebook, and I got a hold of him. And I said, hey, man, how you doing? We're chit-chatting about what we did in our career. And I for some reason, the Marine Corps never left me out of the nuclear weapons field. I stayed in that damn field all the way to the end of my career. And I said, remember the speedboat? And he goes, yeah, the speedboat. And I go, what do you think it was? He says, I don't frickin' know, but you know what? It wasn't a damn speedboat. And I said, I agree. And I kind of left it at that, I let it go. And then recently, with the new F-18 videos of the Tic Tacs flying through the air, I saw the video and I'm like, holy crap, that's kind of what I saw. You know, the video of that little thing moving. I'm like, could it be? You know? And then they said about how it went in the water and it came out of the water. I'm like, holy crap, you know? So that's when I started thinking, you know, and I said, you know, I've been hiding this story all my life. You know, I'm still afraid that if I say it to the wrong people, you know, I'm waiting for the knock at the door, you know, but I don't want to, I'm 61 years old. I don't want to die with this lie. You know, I just want someone else to know about it. And that's my story. So what I thought it was at the time, I didn't think it was anything like a flying saucer. No, I did not. Because back then, you got to remember, this is 85. I'm thinking it was like, because flying saucers were like silver discs, like what you expect to see a flying saucer, right? So in our mind, our little Lance Corporal minds, 22-year-old kid, we're looking at it as maybe, you know, like a bomb. You know, I thought it was maybe a bomb. My buddy thought it was a bomb. You know, that's kind of what we thought. We never thought it was a flying craft because there was no exhaust ports, there was no engine. So of course you're not going to say, oh, that's a UAP, because there was no such thing back then. So that's what we thought it was the whole time. Why they told us it was a speedboat? Hell, I don't know. Maybe that guy came up with it at the last minute and just does what he said, you know. But that's my story. Anyway, so I just want to thank you, and you know, I just hope you can use this story.
So, when I was, I guess 5 years old, I think I moved, maybe it was 4 when I moved to Venezuela for a year. And we lived up on a hill surrounding Caracas. It was a ritzy neighborhood, to be honest. We were just renting there, but, you know, there were like a couple of generals on our street. Yet, all the houses had, they were all walled off, and they had like metal spikes coming out of the walls to make sure nobody could climb over it. And then the ritzier places, ritzier than what we lived in, had something that really struck me, which was broken bottles in between the spikes, just to make it even harder, you know, because the spikes weren't really that big a disincentive to somebody trying to climb in, but getting a lot of broken glass might be. Anyway, this is the first time that I can remember nighttime walks, which were a thing that our family tended to do. Now, I don't know when I was younger if we did any, but the place we were in and that we were renting didn't have like a yard or anything like that. Where we moved from before that had a couple of acres of yard, so we could like walk around in our own fields and whatnot after dinner or something. And there wasn't really, like, the road there was kind of like a little highway type thing, one of the little 2-lane country highways. And but in Venezuela, you know, it was a populous area. So what we ended up, you know, doing was after dinner most nights, we would go for a walk. And we would go for a walk up a little further up the hill, and there'd be this beautiful panoramic view of the whole city, all the lights sparkling and everything, like gems. It was something my dad used to really like to see. And, you know, there would also, it would be kind of dark at that end of the hill, and you would often see shooting stars there, and you could see a lot of the stars, a lot more than I can see here. But anyway, one of those nights, I mean, we had our dog and our cat with us, and that was part of it, was the dog had to go for a walk, and he couldn't just be allowed to run free in a city. Our dog would, you know, be on a leash and be traveling with us, or But the cat would follow us for a couple of blocks, and then she would just sit down and wait until we came back. But the dog would come with us, and I know that we took a right-hand turn at some point. You know, there's not, my memories of the layout and everything aren't perfect, but we took a right-hand turn onto another residential street on our walk, at least on this one night. And soon after that, and I'm not sure of the order of these things, but our dog and other dogs started barking. And either just before or just after that, my father noticed that there was something in the sky. We looked up, and there was a orange glowing globe. I mean, it's nighttime, right? Looked kind of like a harvest moon, except it was overhead, not at the horizon where a harvest moon would be. And it descended, not terribly rapidly. And as this was happening, people started coming out into the street, mira, 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 you know, just all shouting to look. And, you know, there had to be at least a dozen people who noticed this. When it got to its lowest point, whatever that was, and it didn't seem very close, and there was no noise, no wind, nothing going on, it was huge, okay? It took up, I don't know how much. Like, part of me wants to say like half the sky, but I'm not absolutely certain of that. But, you know, on a conservative estimate, it was blotting out like a quarter of the sky that I could see, just standing outside, you know, nothing obscured, nothing. And it was just this orange, I want to say sphere, but I don't know. A disc, essentially, like I could see an orange circle, like when you look at the moon, right? It's what it looked like. It looked like the fucking moon, except there were no markings on it or anything. And it was relatively, like, there was a glow to it, like there is with the moon. I mean, it's as if somebody had, like, taken the moon and done something really ridiculous with it and put it overhead, you know, and then brought it closer. Which obviously nothing like that could happen. And it just sort of stopped lowering at some point, or getting bigger, or whatever it did. And then it just shot off and accelerated really rapidly out, you know, over the city, I think. And that was it. And I remember, you know, my parents trying to look in the papers, look on the news, see if there was anything about it. There was no reports about it that we were aware of. We didn't know the people on that street, and I don't think we made any attempt to contact them and ask what was going on. Among other things, Venezuela didn't feel like a safe place, right? Like, you know, there were soldiers who were direct, you know, when traffic needed to be directed, there were people who looked like soldiers carrying submachine guns, and they'd be waving traffic with their machine gun. One time I was playing on a tank in a park, you know, just, it was like a monument or something, and a couple of guys with submachine guns came and were like, "You have to get off the tank," but they said it in Spanish. But yeah, it felt so different, and you know, there were reports of these guys accidentally shooting themselves or other people, you know, so they weren't really careful with those guns that they were waving around. Anyway, there was just sort of this feeling of, well, it's best we don't ask around or you know, try to get any information, because things didn't feel safe to us. At least, you know, that's the impression I got from it. And there was just nothing in the news, and my speculations about it, you know, I mean, there's ideas like mass hallucination, right? Which it's a known thing. Maybe that's what happened. if that is what it was, I have to say, for my little 5-year-old brain at the time, I can't think of, there's nothing to lead me to believe that. If you can't trust what you see in that sort of way, what can you do? It didn't seem like any kind of reasonable military type thing. It's possible that was a time when Venezuela the government was not entirely unfriendly to Americans. The people were not friendly to Americans. They saw the foreign interventions and whatnot, the financial ones primarily, as being problematic. And so there was a lot of get out of here, we want our own oil, type of feeling to the situation, which of course is what led to things later. But it didn't seem like a military thing. It didn't seem like a weather balloon. For one thing, it was fucking huge. And the other is that movement away, that felt like a directed movement, not like a balloon would do, and it was just so fast. It was really, and it's not like it deflated or anything like that. It just, boom, In later years, I can remember my mom asking me if I remembered what happened. And I'm like, yeah, I think so, and I told her what I remembered of it. And she may have told me other things, and that may be infecting my memory or whatever. I know that on our way back, after we had gotten back to America, my parents managed to contact some members of the crew of the ship that we went over to Venezuela on, for some reason or another. I mean, it was just like, they had kept in contact or something. It was we were on a weird kind of ship. It was like essentially a freighter, but it carried some passengers, and it was very nice accommodations for passengers, but there weren't a lot of us. And great food and all kind of stuff. It was sort of the cheapest way for us to move all our shit. I don't know, like I said, we contacted some of the people who were on the ship that we traveled over on, and what they kind of had to say was, each of us has seen some pretty fucking weird shit while we were sailing around in the Caribbean, and maybe they hadn't seen what we had seen or anything like that, but they had seen some pretty fucking weird shit in the sky. And it was kind of like, yeah, that's just the way things are. Kind of. And I don't know if they were pulling our legs or what. I don't think I was there for it anyway. And again, I would still be pretty young at this point. It wasn't long after we got back to America that we ended up in contact with them. And that's all I have, But short of something like a mass hallucination event, as far as I'm concerned, I know I saw something. I have no fucking clue what it is. And I still can't really tell, which is totally different. So my first wife, when she was in Buffalo, she was with her mom. And they saw something that they were like, wow, what the hell is that? It looks like a UFO or something. Turned out it was like one of the stealth bombers or something like that before they were known about. But this didn't look like a vehicle. It didn't look like a plane or anything like that. It looked like the fucking moon, coming down. And I try to think if there's any way that like a weather balloon or something could look that big and that smooth, right? Like, and glowing. Glowing. And that just doesn't seem likely to me. But anyway, I figured I'd give you what little I saw because it is kind of a weird thing. And I don't know if anybody else who's seen that. A lot of people have seen things in the sky that are fucked up and weird. This was, you hear some of the UFO sightings and stuff, and they're like things like a set of lights traveling in formation or something. I'm like, geez, if I saw that, like I know there was a set of lights over Phoenix that caused a big brouhaha. I regularly saw lights like that over Phoenix because I was near the airport and the planes would they'd look very similar to that kind of thing. Obviously, people could tell some sort of difference, but this just seems weird, That's all. Anyway, that's all I got to say.
Somewhere in the Skies is produced by Third Kind Productions in association with the Entertainment One Podcast Network.